Καλημέρα σας. Καλώς ήρθατε στο vFORUMonline. My name is Vishnya Radosh. As network and security specialist, I'm happy to help customers across Middle Europe and Greece for that matter with our virtual cloud network portfolio, and very excited today to share the latest updates about NSX service-defined firewall. NSX is a platform, is very well known in Greece and the region, and it has quite some happy customers deploying it for multiple use cases. Different use cases from switching, routing, firewalling have been deployed and used over the years. Recently, we have extended that from the data centers into software-defined WAN architectures as well. So you will hear more about the latest news from my colleague, George. When it comes to NSX, the latest announcement around service-defined firewall is really focusing into this security use case in our multi-cloud environments, as we've noticed that our customers a lot of the times use NSX as a firewalling solution. Sometimes customers are not interested to deploy the entire use cases from NSX platform, being routing or switching, because it's already solved in their underlying networking. And they're very happy to use NSX as a micro-segmentation solution that has now evolved into a very robust next generation firewall solution that we call service-defined firewall. It has been upgraded with our intrusion detection and protection mechanisms, and I'm going to provide you with more details what is coming up next in our service-defined firewall. So besides this use case that we're going to touch more on today, and that is letting us deploy our security policy without changing the network policy or without changing the network details, NSX also has other new use cases such as application delivery use cases around WAF, DDoS protection, global site selection that all came through acquisition of Avi Networks. So let's dive a bit deeper into NSX service-defined firewall. As we know today, our environments are typically protected by the systems that are hosted in the operating system, such as antivirus solutions, next-gen antivirus, endpoint detection and response systems, and so on. So many different solutions that reside in the operating system. On the other hand, all of us are giving the best to protect our applications and our multi-cloud environments with different kinds of firewalling technologies by introducing inspections on the network. And when we try to protect our application with our network security solutions, we're typically deploying today in the traditional environment some kind of appliances. So many of our customers have a lot of appliances in their data center that are doing firewalling, IDS, IPS, load balancing, and so on. And what we essentially do in those designs, we're using network constructs in order to bring the traffic to those appliances so that they can be inspected or that a policy can be introduced. So without changing the network or without reconfiguring the network today, we're not capable to introduce security rules or to strengthen the security. That's why we see our customers many times making the trade-off between security and manageability, because it's not easy to make a full whitelist policy and to protect all the traffic and just to allow what's needed for application when you need to reconfigure your entire network to put those policies in place. So service-defined firewall is very unique in the capability that NSX brings, and this is to place security policy in the kernel of the ESX host, of the KVM host, also into the container environments, into cloud native environments, even supporting bare metal servers. So this very unique placement of the policy allows us not to touch the network when we need to enforce a security rule. It allows for this security policy to be much more granular than the network construct. So we can, for example, inspect the traffic between the two workloads that reside on the same VLAN. And this is not possible today. So if we really want to make our infrastructure segmented to the level of the workload, NSX is pretty much the only choice today. And we see that customers really deployed regardless of other security solutions that they have in their data centers. So the components of this service-defined firewall are obviously distributed NSX firewall that is now not only L4 stateful firewall, but also L7 stateful firewall that supports hundreds of application IDs that are relevant in the data center. It is also identity firewall that allows for source and destination groups to be based on user IDs, and it allows for integration with Active Directory. Furthermore, we have introduced FQDN and URL filtering to our distributed firewall, which all makes it a next-gen firewall solution. Advanced threat protection is the latest addition to this distributed firewall solution. And it adds IDS, IPS engines, as well as network sandboxing and behavioral-based analytics on the network. So this all good stuff came from our last line acquisition that happened this year. And the process of integrating NSX and last line is ongoing, and we're all very enthusiastic about that. The visibility, the monitoring and analytics platform that provides additional pair of eyes and monitoring into this environment is called NSX Intelligence. It does real-time flow analytics. It provides automated rule recommendations. So it actually monitors through our entire traffic in the data center, and it provides the rule recommendations so that we can allow only the traffic that is needed for our applications to function, for our users to access it, and to block everything else. It is a security dashboard with a lot of alerts, and it's the platform that is going to be providing network detection and response information, event correlation, and triage are all the goods that we're bringing from last line. When it comes to service-defined firewall, it's very unique in its architecture. So we will discuss briefly what does it mean, distributed NSX architecture. It's very unique for the visibility and service awareness. And lastly, and probably most importantly, it does provide simplicity in running. So the users and security teams especially love it because it's very easy to define your security policy without touching the network and by being much more intelligent about your real-time traffic. So the firewall itself, as mentioned, is L4L7 firewall, is an identity-based firewall, allows for an integration into Active Directory. It is a very common use case that we see in VDI environments, for example, lately, as remote access is a very hot topic. It does allow also for integration into agentless antivirus solutions. So we have guest introspection framework that is open for our partner companies to integrate, and we allow for agentless install of Trend Micros, Bitdefenders, and other antivirus systems of the world to be deployed across the environment without the need of deploying agents by leveraging our VM tools. Much tighter integration is coming also to our own endpoint detection and response system, which is Carbon Black, that will allow for the integration of workload context to the network context. It's going to be unique in that sense that it's going to provide correlation between the workload and the network context in the same platform. IDS IPS is distributed in nature, similarly like firewall. So it allows for big performance. So we can basically put our entire traffic behind IDS and IPS, and we don't need to care anymore which part of the traffic is going to be inspected and which not, because we're limited by the performance of our appliances that we have. With the NSX platform, we can put everything behind policy, firewall, IDS, IPS policy, with very advanced performance. And this solution can scale. It supports nicely our small customers with just a couple of ESX hosts, as well as biggest customers with thousands of ESX hosts, because the architecture is distributed. Context-based threat detection is very unique, and we'll talk more about this. NSX intelligence is the third component, as mentioned. So is topology and flow. It provides topology and flow visualization, automated policy recommendations, as mentioned, where you can monitor certain environment after NSX deploy. You can understand what are the current flows and communication between different application tiers. You can get your recommendation in terms of groupings and which group can talk to which and over which ports, and recommendation for everything else to be blocked. You can also train those recommendations. So for example, when you get a recommendation, you can do what if analysis. So you can do what if and then see, if you would push this policy, if that would put down certain flows or not. And then you can iterate towards the accepted production policy to be pushed. So we mentioned that architecture is quite unique. It's actually very different to what many of the customers are running today, which is like an appliance-based approach. So instead of running appliance, we're recommending to run distributed software across all of your ESX hosts that is managed and run by NSX Manager as a central place where all the configuration and policy is defined. So it's one API, it's one graphical interface that pushes the configuration to very distributed environment that can be inside of one data center, across multiple data centers, and across multi-cloud environments. So this kind of architecture scales linearly. So you don't need to, the point of scaling linearly means that you don't need to over provision today, like typically when we're planning a new firewall appliance in the data center, we're scoping for the traffic for next 3 or 5 years, as typically the lifespan of an appliance is. With NSX, we can cover the current environment, and then we can scale linearly towards your future growth. It's placed into the hypervisor, which again is a very unique placement for a security policy. It's not in the operating system, and we all know what are the challenges of placing security software in operating system. It's not on the network, which on the other side creates a lot of the complication and operational overhead to make tight security policy on network-based appliances. So it gives this very nice placement, and many of our customers really appreciate it, especially security teams. So it's very scalable. So we have some huge customers like Barclays, Bank of Americas, and so on, with thousands of hosts. And it does provide for easy integrations into network security partners, and also guest introspection partners, so antivirus systems and such. Not only the architecture is unique, but very unique is the fact that this is a modern software that has been built with analytics embedded, which provides a very much of additional context and insight into the environment that we're trying to protect. So it's going to show us exactly the flows that are running. It's going to provide service groupings for us in an automated fashion. So it will monitor which virtual machines are communicating over similar protocols, similar timings, to similar users, targets, and so on. So it's going to provide those service groupings, and it's going to provide a recommendation for the policy, which is going to be a great starting point for our administrators to continue and to make those policy production policy. When it comes to IDS IPS, it's very unique in a sense that when a flow hits our IDS IPS appliance, is not just a flow that has a source IP and destination IP. We know very well through our integrations to vCenter and going forward also to Carbon Black, the context of this application, meaning is it an SQL, for example, or we're reading this only through the vCenter integration, or it's a Tomcat server. And knowing this, we don't need to scan this traffic against 13,000 signatures downloaded today, but we can scan it only against a handful of those that are relevant for MySQL traffic, for example. Not only that this allows us to have a line rate engine across the environment, but it also provides an architecture that limits and reduces the false positives, which we know is the biggest issue for the network and security administrators over there while trying to operationalize IDS IPS. So taking this further towards a network detection and response platform that we're determined to make with our service-defined firewall, besides IDS and IPS engines, we're adding network threat analytics and network sandboxing to our service-defined firewall. So this great technology is added by latest acquisition of Lastline, and the integration into our service-defined firewall is ongoing. Nevertheless, the selling motion and the service-defined firewall is available starting from a few days ago. So customers can acquire with one selling motion both of the technologies, NSX service-defined firewall together with the Lastline, and deploy it in their environments. So the integration is ongoing, and it's going to provide great functionalities around unsupervised machine learning, supervised threat-centric machine learning models. It's going to provide great capability of detecting anomalous activities and malicious behaviors, and also recognize them while they're laterally spread across the environment, presenting this in a very nice and graphical form. So it's going to be very easy to detect what are the attacks and what are the attack logic, what are the known attacks that have been recognized through this NDR solution, and obviously we'll be able to automatically block them through our NSX firewall. So with all of that, I'd like to summarize by sharing a NISA trend landscape that actually brings the attention to different possible attacks that we see nowadays being very relevant into the customer environments. And today we've talked about service-defined firewall that can very well help prevent malware, ransomware, information leakage, and all of those type of attacks that have been a big threat lately. Additionally, web-based attacks, spam, DDoS kind of attacks is something that we're addressing through our AVI Networks acquisition and through our NSX Advanced Load Balancer and VAF functionality. So stay tuned and really look forward to stay in contact to get your further questions and interest into any of the technologies we mentioned. I do hope you're safe behind your laptops, and do hope for some soon follow-up meetings. Enjoy the rest of the vFORUM.